foster, kinship, adoption. Welcome to CareCast, the podcast for anyone called to care. Whether you're navigating kinship care, stepping into foster care, or walking through the joys and complexities of adoption, you're in the right place. Encouragement, real talk, and lasting hope. This is a space to be encouraged, inspired, and reminded that you're never alone. We bring real stories from real people, caregivers, experts, agency and community leaders, dedicated volunteers, as well as those who've walked this journey firsthand. Because when we take the time to hold stories with compassion, courage, and community, we all grow stronger. My name is Nanci Weinstein, and I'm your host. Join us as we hold space for the hearts behind the hard work and the children we need who need us most. Welcome to CareCast.
Well, hello. I am Pastor Logan today. It's just the two of us now.
I know.
And so we've gone a lot of podcasts with a lot of guests, and now it's just the two of us today talking a little bit about the church and foster care and how we can help churches and people get involved in the space.
No, and I have questions. I have lots of questions for you.
Lots of questions. I'll do my best today.
Well, let's just start, really from the very beginning. If a church is looking to get involved in this space, they want to do something, they want to serve families that are in need with vulnerable children. So that could be a child that has been placed with a grandmother or family member, and so we call that kinship care. Mm-hmm. It could be a child that is in the foster care system and is being fostered by a family. And it could be even those families that have adopted but might need some other supports that churches can provide for their family. So how can churches get involved?
Well, I want to start with this first.
Okay.
Is like, know your why. Yeah. And I think that before the what we do, we have to know why we do it. And I think that the Bible compels us from beginning to end to see all through Scripture that God has called us to step into spaces to serve vulnerable people. And James 1:27 is probably one of the most famous verses as it pertains to foster care. And it says that pure and undefiled religion is to serve orphans and widows in their distress. Now, I know that word orphan is not used in the American context very often anymore. But it wasn't just speaking about widows and orphans contextually to foster care, but really people in hard places, people who need help. And that's what we get to do. I think that the church is called to be like Christ, Jesus, and we often see Jesus not moving from, but towards hard places and people who are in need with compassion. And so that's our why. Every Christian and every church should have a why, and that why is that as Christ compels us to serve the least of these or those who are in need or in help, we should go also and do the same. But then the what should we do or how should we get involved? And we say often at Restoration 225 that it begins in the heart of one person. That really a church could be 1,000 people or 10 people. And really if there's one person who is compelled, one person who is broken for a need, that is the person that we want to focus in on first to start this mission, to start this ministry, to begin the process of helping these kids and families impacted by foster care.
And kind of along those lines, I was thinking about what are some misconceptions? What are some misunderstandings that maybe those sitting in the church pews and the church seats are thinking about when they hear foster care? What are some misconceptions that they might have, or kinship care? A lot of people don't even know what kinship care is.
Yeah, I think it's good to define the terms. This we've been able to do often here. Foster care, or in Southern California, we call it resource families, which we're the only state in the United States that calls it resource families. But foster families, resource families, are those who have taken a placement of a children, into their custody, into their care for a period of time so that they might go through a process of being reunified with their biological family. Now, we know that doesn't always happen. But there's a process of kind of a caregiver that steps into the story and says, yes, we'll open our home. Oftentimes they're licensed through an agency or through a county, background checked and had all the kind of training that you can get. Not enough training. There's not enough training available out there that really can ever prepare you for all that goes into foster care. But as much as possible to help you to be ready to open your home and open your heart to taking these kids. And then kinship is something that I don't even know that I knew the term until just a few years ago, which is usually a kiddo or kids being placed in the home of what could be a friend or family member. For us in our space, it's oftentimes single grandmothers living under the poverty line. It's a really hard space, but oftentimes it's a grandparent, it's an aunt or uncle, it's a brother or sister. We've had stories of brothers and sisters in their 20s taking in their siblings who are in their teens and saying, yes, we'll do this because something happened to mom and dad. And now instead of placing them outside of their family unit and being with maybe a foster home or a foster family or a group home or a situation like that, they're able to take them into custody with care, and maybe either for a temporary period of time or for a permanent or in permanency, if you will.
And then let's talk about some of those needs, right? So we here at Restoration 225, we serve all of the people we've discussed: kinship care families, foster care families, adoptive families. But when we're talking kinship care, there's some unique needs that I think impact them. Maybe it's ability to access services for the children in their care. It might be resources. It could start with the mattresses and the beds. Yes, grandma or cousin or auntie or brother, big brother says, yes, I want to take my family member in, but I don't have an extra mattress and bed sitting around my house. Maybe they have the space, but I need help with that. So what are some of the unique challenges that I would say kinship families face?
Okay, well, this could be kinship, this could be birth families, this could be foster families. Anytime a child is placed, there's a list of needs that have to be met. So when we think of kinship, let's say a grandmother who's taken in her grandkids. Oftentimes in our situation, as we've met with these families, we've seen these families, it's usually not one, it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And a grandmother has said yes to open her home. And as we said, sometimes these grandparents are 65, 70 years old on a fixed income, living in California, San Diego. I don't know. You can look up the stats, but it's really, really, really expensive to live here. But even though they're family, they can't have those children placed with them until these needs are met. And so one of the basic needs oftentimes are things like a bed or a mattress. And for some people out there listening today, they might think, okay, just run out and buy a mattress, run out and buy a bed. Well, I don't know if you know this, but beds and mattresses and bedding and pillows, you're talking anywhere from $500 to $1,000 just to get that need met. Now, if you're a 70-year-old grandmother living under the poverty line on a fixed income, you don't have a truck, maybe you're by yourself or you're caring for other family members, that's not so easy to get.
And you may not just need one bed,
yes,
right? If you're taking
yes.
in 3 kiddos, you might need 3 beds.
Yeah, and talking to social workers and county agencies, we found a lot of times for us that bunk beds are a top priority need because of the number of children that are being placed. And so, and then even to put that bed together. And so these are really basic things for some people, but for these kinship caregivers who say yes, or even if it's a 25-year-old, it doesn't matter. This is a hard thing to come across and to get this all together so that these kids can be placed with their biological family members and keep them together and keep them out of the system. And so one way that we encourage churches to step into the stories of these families is to provide some of these basic needs. Now, if you've been following Restoration 225 for any amount of time, you know that we kind of have 3 primary ways to serve. The first is what we call Care Portal. It's a software platform that we use that we have implemented right here in San Diego County, and we train churches to get involved, to get on Care Portal that has that one person with a big heart who says yes, and they get kind of these prompts or emails of needs in their community, and they can just say yes and buy those items for those families. We train response teams who would think about deeply the families that they're serving and not just purchase those, but also through a local church, deliver those and maybe even put those together. So what we're trying to do is take away any sort of barrier or red tape that would keep a kid out of a safe and loving environment. The second way that we like to help train and serve families is through what we call care communities. And sometimes this is step 2. A step 1 Care Portal is the easiest way to get involved, but step 2 care communities is maybe you've built a relationship with this family and you said, hey, we just delivered a bed, don't want to be obnoxious, want to give you some space, but number 1, can we pray for you? And number 2, is there any way that we might be able to just follow up in a week or 2 and just see if you need anything else? And 80% of the time it's just like, no, thank you so much for the bed, it's good. But we believe this, that the resources are a good first step, but the relationship is key to life change. And so sometimes during COVID, we saw this a lot more, less since COVID has kind of dissipated and transitioned here in California. But sometimes a family will say, yes, we would love for you to follow up with us and check in. And our response teams, when they check in on those families, sometimes they'll say, hey, do you have any other needs? It could be anything from school clothes to tutoring to just meeting up with these family members, these caregivers, these foster parents, these grandparents, and say, hey, we'd love to meet you at a park. Can we buy you dinner? And sometimes a care community is born. And what did that look like? It looks like 3 to 5 people who say yes to 6 to 8 weeks of just meals or groceries, a phone call, and we say prayer if they want it. And we're hoping that that would lead to a long-lasting relationship because we think that connection changes everything. And finally, the third way is through our what we say care connections. And those are oftentimes churches that say, we're going to do a diaper drive, we're going to do a formula drive, we're going to do a backpack drive, we're going to do an event, we're going to open our church for churches to get involved. So there's a lot of ways for churches to get involved. There's a lot of needs that these families have, relationships being number one. I think that's one of the things that we learned when we first started this journey, that I always thought it was going to be the resources that people needed, and they do. But man, did I underestimate the value of resource or the value of relationships. Mm-hmm. We started this journey with these care calls, and I would tell our teams early on, I was doing a bit more of this in training. Now, Emily does a lot of that. I'd say call for 5 to 10 minutes. Well, during COVID, 5 to 10 minutes turned into 30 to 45 minutes.
It still does sometimes.
Yes,
I make the phone calls. The grandparents and the caregivers, they very often want to tell you what they're trying to manage because their heart is big and they want to serve the kids that are in their care. But like any parent, maybe they don't have someone they can talk to because their friends are not taking care of kids at that time, right?
Yeah. And
so they want to talk to someone who is. And so we are raising children. And so oftentimes they'll just be like, oh, I know Johnny at school and this and that. And they're going in a long conversation. But you know what? At the end of that conversation, I didn't give anything but time.
Yeah.
And at the end, or maybe a little, oh, I hear you. Yeah, I know my kid, this or that or that. Just sharing the way parents do. And then at the end of the call, they're like, thank you so much for listening. I really just needed to talk to someone about all that I'm managing. I can get this item or that item, but I don't have anybody who will just listen to what I'm going through.
No, that's so good. I think that's one of the things that we see as we're talking today on this podcast. What we're thinking of, what are some of the basic needs that these families have? There's a crisis in Southern California. I know in a few minutes you'll share some of the statistics that exist here in Southern California and all over the United States of America. We don't want to take that big number and scare everybody, but bring it down, shrink it small for San Diego in specific. But I think also there's some real ways that we can get involved in churches. Number one, our why is that we should because Jesus did. And as Christians, we shouldn't have ministries. We shouldn't have churches that don't seek to serve those in need. If you're a church that is Sunday services only, you're missing the purpose and the heart behind what Jesus came to do. And then also, as you just said with these care calls, sometimes the best thing that you can do is just be there, to just listen. And I said earlier that I just underestimated the value of that. If you're a small church thinking, well, we don't have the resources to make a difference in the lives of these kids, or maybe we can't buy formula or beds or whatever the case may be, I know that there's somebody in your church right now who can pick up the phone, who can make a meal, who can drop it off, who can listen, who can talk. There's a lot of phrases that we throw around at Restoration 225. One of them is that we want to be relational, not transactional. And sometimes, with the best of intentions, there are agencies out there that are doing incredible work, like resources beyond resources beyond resources, doing good thing after good thing after good thing. But it's kind of like this revolving door, and it's like you just come and pick up your stuff and go, and come and pick up your stuff and go. And we want to train churches, and we want to be the kind of people at Restoration 225 that you come and pick up your stuff and stay. And we want to be with you, and we want to see you, and we want to hear you. Now, what that does is that slows the process. That means that sometimes we don't help as many people as quickly as possible. But the quality of care and attention and relationship we give to those people is so much greater. And we don't want to be an assembly line of resources that are just going out. We want to be like a circle of relationships that are just sitting and caring and loving and talking and praying and really helping those families that need the kind of help that they can. And every church has the ability to do that.
100%, 100%. And just finding out where you fit and where you can serve and how you can do that. You mentioned statistics, so I am going to get, some might say boring, but I think it is important to have a few statistics to share so that we kind of are on the same page of what's going on in foster care, vulnerable children, the child that is in need in San Diego County. So without consistent support, children are at a significant risk for lifelong struggles, of course. It consists of 70% of foster youth face homelessness after aging out. 78% of kids that enter the foster care system is due to neglect. And 80% of children in the system suffer from mental health issues. So those are just a few of the major stats that we look at as what happens to children that aren't given consistent love, consistent help, consistent basically a community like you're talking about, which that's our hope is that, we come, we deliver the car seat, we come, we deliver the bed, but that we also are delivering and sitting with and listening to the caregiver and talking with the child and providing ongoing support because we know statistics tell us that makes a difference.
Yeah. I think those are really good. There are so many other statistics that talk about incarceration and homelessness and even sex trafficking, which is terrible. When you look at all these statistics, one of the things that I have thought often is all of these major issues in society that we're broken over, that we wish we could fix, I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but maybe we can have a greater impact on all those if we step into the stories of youth impacted by foster care way, way, way down the stream. Now, we use this terminology called the river and the stream, and we've got a great video that we can share at some point. We can put it online for you guys to check out. But really this idea of the stream is that there are people, we say, that are downstream, right? There are people that are in the middle of the river, and there's people that are coming out of the river. And we use these three words called prevention, intervention, restoration. And so there's different ways to get involved. Sometimes we want to see the family before they ever get into crisis. Sometimes the intervention is the family that jumps into the deep end and they see a kid or family drowning and they become foster parents. And other times there are people that say, I'm not going to foster, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mentor. I'm going to walk alongside this family and support in some way. I'm going to provide a care community around them as they're reunified. We're going to do coaching. We're going to do help in some way to make sure that this family, as they've come out of this situation, maybe it's foster care, maybe a child or children were removed and now they're back home. Those parents, those family members still need help. They still need community. They still need someone to show them and to show up for them in ways that is going to help them become successful down the road. And so just because your kids are placed in your home again doesn't mean you have it all together and doesn't mean that you no longer need help. But as it pertains to a lot of resources, sometimes it's on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And so we want to train churches and volunteers to say, what's my place in the story? And maybe my place in the story is down the road in restoration and saying, hey, we want to come alongside and walk alongside you a little bit to help you continue this journey of health and hope and healing.
Or maybe your part of the story is preventative, right? So that the child never got into the river, so to speak, and felt overwhelmed, and everything in between those two. Mm-hmm. And I know our main goal is to partner with churches and say, well, where can you serve, and who can you serve? What would you say, is an example of a story, maybe that in your own life, with your own family, or maybe it's more for how you've gotten involved as a pastor, or maybe just as Logan, what's a story you could share with us about, I did this and this impacted my family, myself, and then obviously impacted those that you were serving?
Yeah, in a previous episode, I just shared how I've been impacted so much by the church and by people. I didn't grow up in church, and God used a lot of men and women in my life to shape the person who I've become today. And I still have a lot of work to do. That in turn led us to down the road fostering and then later adopting. And so our own lived experiences have helped shape our perspective on how we should help. Now, I said earlier that like the Bible should be alone the basis for why we get involved, but I think sometimes as churches, as Christians, we have all sorts of reasons why we don't. I think for churches sometimes there's so many ministries that take place. We start to build and develop this ecosystem around our church body and our people. It can become easy to forget about all the needs outside or to think, well, I can't do all these things. So instead of doing something, you do nothing. Also, sometimes, again, we've said we don't know where to start. And so for us, one of the ways that we started at our church was we launched a care closet. Now, we didn't just do this haphazardly. I think one of the things I would tell to church leaders and people is do some research, ask some people, ask good questions. So many churches have an idea and they don't collaborate well. They don't do partnership well. We've talked about this as well, the power of partnerships and why it's important to partner. Even with organizations like Restoration 225, we need 10,000 more R225s here in San Diego and around the country, and there's others like us in different places. But I think that instead of reinventing the wheel, we can partner with people. But we realized very early that there were some basic needs that we talked about earlier, like beds, and we found out car seats and strollers. These were three major barriers that are keeping kids from returning home or for being placed with kinship family or needs that foster families had. When my wife and I started our journey of foster care, we said yes to sibling sets. Well, one of the things you have to do is a home study. And so we prepared this room for a child, one, with a crib, and we also had a car seat, again, one. Mm-hmm. And then we got this call and said, hey, there's two kids. And we're like, okay, yes, but ... we have one bed and one car seat. And there's a lot of restriction. We can't go pick up two little kids who need car seats with just one. But our church and our friends activated, and they just ran out and got everything. So again, a lived experience helped us to see these kids would have not been able to be placed with us with all that they'd experienced over the last 24 hours of their life, which was hard and horrible and traumatic. And while we were strangers, we were a loving, safe environment for them, and they couldn't come with us until we had these things. So later on, as I became a pastor at our church, we were looking for ways to serve families and people in our city, and we had a lot of space, and so we decided, hey, let's launch a care closet. But let's not just reinvent the wheel. Let's search kind of a 15-mile radius. Let's see what's out there. I remember our church members saying, we should do a food pantry. We should do this. We should do that. And I remember searching and finding there were 8 food distributions, like one, almost more than one every day of the week, but then also in just like a 5-minute radius. So it's like, here's the thing, guys. We don't need to do another food distribution or pantry. While that's good, those already exist. Mm-hmm. But what there wasn't anything of that we could see was a closet. Well, closets can be so broad or they can be so narrow. We opened a closet. We called our care closet. And we've had diapers and formula and clothes in them. But that was not our focus because we didn't have a large enough church or a large enough volunteer base to sift through all the clothes and all the stuff. So we landed on talking with these families, with our community leaders, with social workers and agencies, and said, what do we need? And so we said, we are going to focus on beds and car seats and strollers. And man, God provided where people in our church showed up to provide these things. I applied for some grants and received some funding. Other churches heard what we were doing around the country. We had a church partner called Valleydale Church in Birmingham, Alabama, that got us started. Our own church jumped in. It was crazy to see this church that didn't have a very big budget, but now our care closet is having thousands of dollars poured into it. And we started stocking it with brand new strollers, brand new beds, brand new car seats. And we would have these partners that we were working with, like Young Lives or the YMCA Kinship Navigators Program or other foster families or just whoever had a need. And they would call or they would use Care Portal and submit a need. And we would just hit that request and we'd say, this is what we can do. And then our response team and our care coordinator would take care of this. And we would deliver items. Sometimes we would partner with other churches to provide the needs. So that these kids could come, these kids could go back home, or even kids that were on the preventative end in homes that had never had a bed. I mean, jarring to me how many times we provided a bed for a kid that was sleeping on the floor or a kid that was sleeping on a couch, and they found out about our care closet, and we said, yes, we'll do that. And how excited teenage boys were to have a bed because they were sleeping on a futon or a couch or nothing at all.
No, and I know a story from one of the church partners we have at Center Church, and she talked to us about how when they went to deliver the bed and they made up the bed, that the teenage boy was so overwhelmed. He had tears in his eyes. He got in the bed and he pretty much didn't get out of the bed the rest of the time as they were putting some other things together. And, you know, I think of my own kids as teenagers. I mean, yeah, they stayed in the bed a lot sometimes, but it was more not out of gratitude that they were in their bed. It was just they're being teens. And I think the beauty of being able to step in someone's story and provide something as what many of us would say is simple as a bed. Yeah. And placing that there, but what that changes. Because what we know is statistically, if a young person, child, teenager, young person, gets a good night's sleep, then they can go to school and function better at school and function, because we all know if you don't get a good night's sleep, nothing goes right in your day. You're frustrated, you're short-tempered, all these things, and that can just set off a multitude of other issues. And so one of the reasons that I love that your church is really focused on that bed, not just because that's what a placement needs, like in order to happen, right? Yeah. Oh, the child can't come unless I have a bed. Yes, true. But beyond that, what that bed means to that child from crib all the way up to teenager and beyond, it means a good night's sleep. It means their own space. It means that someone saw what they needed and fulfilled it. And that, I know in our fostering journey, I remember my son's biological dad said, "Where does he sleep when he's at your house?" And I thought that was such an interesting question because in my head, I'm like, well, he sleeps in his crib, and then eventually toddler bed as he got older. But I was like, why, where did you think he slept in our bed? And I said, we're not allowed to do that. And he said, no, I just figured you put him on the floor or something. Because for him, that had been his experience. That for himself, that was his own experience. And to this, even at that point, he said, I've never had my own room. I've never had my own bed. And it brought him to tears to hear that that's what his son had. And so I think it's just brings back to home, like we need to be reminded that we can take for granted a lot of the things that we have, and that it means so much to that father was impressed by the care that I was giving his son, but he was so impressed and thankful, and I'm not a hero. I just provided what the county required, right? But my son is going to have a place to sleep that was better than what I had.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I think that's one of the things, too, that as we get into the stories of these families, it's easy to start with judgment. But I hope that we begin with empathy. And that's something that the Lord has taught me through my own experiences, good and bad. I think that we can project our situations and circumstances on families. As I've experienced some trauma and hurt, I think that is exactly what's happening here. But I find out often, too, that through just talking to these people, these moms and dads, that they've had a really rough time, or they've had stories that have shaped the way that they have behaved or the things that have happened. And for so many of them, they do all that needs to be done, and kids get to go home. And we hope that there's an ongoing support there and resources provided. And for me, it's always relationships. I'm selfish as a pastor. I hope that they find a local church that would see them, that would meet those needs, not just for them in that moment, but as they grow. But then also, I think that we know and believe, too, that no matter what, that change can take place. And then for those who don't, like that God's still in charge of their story. And so I think that's true for our kids as well. Our oldest 3 kids were adopted. They're our forever kids. There's celebration in that, and there's sadness in that always, because there's a part of their story that's not connected to their birth family. We do connect with other birth family members. But, man, God was still in control and still in charge of their story. And we have been blessed to be their parents as well. And so much there, so many layers I could talk about.
No, I agree, and I think it's always a reminder. I know we both have foster children, and went through adoption as well. But it's a big reminder that we always give honor and integrity to the family that was their birth family, because the truth is, I would never sit with my son and say anything about his biological parents, because he is a part of them and they are a part of him. So if I love him, I have to love them. And I may not love every choice that they made ultimately. It may have caused some struggles for both themselves and my son, and their son, but I honor who they are. And I don't know if I had experienced and lived their life if I wouldn't have the same struggles, if I wouldn't have made the same choices. And that's the reminder here, is that we do this work not because we're perfect, not because we're better, not because we think that we have all the answers, but because perhaps in our lives we were given something that helped us to not have the situation that others might have found themselves in. And therefore, that's a gift that we were given that maybe they weren't given. And they didn't get to have that opportunity. And we see that as a calling for us to step into stories and lighten their load in some way. And whether that is fostering the child, adopting the child, helping the biological family members to raise the child, whatever that looks like, we're called to do that, not because we're better, but because God says, love those that are in need, period.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. Okay, we're done now. No kidding. I'm just joking. But, so then my next question is, okay, we've talked about why we do it, why it's important. How can we motivate those churches? I know there are, what did you say, 1,400 churches in San Diego?
1,400 Christian churches, in San Diego County.
And our goal at Restoration 225 is always to get, if we could just get 10%, we say, 10% of those churches. And we have a lot of churches that really do partner with us, but we always need more. I'm going to look right, this camera, here it is. We always need more. So we always need more churches. We always need more volunteers, because the need is great. Okay, so how can we motivate, encourage? Where can a church start? How can they get involved?
Yeah, I'll say this. Number one, again, going back to the beginning, every church should be involved in serving families and kids, not just impacted by foster care, but as we said earlier, there's so many overlapping issues that start right there at foster care in the beginning, in the preventative stages. And so I think there's a lot of things that churches are already doing. They just don't know how to connect the dots. One of the things I've loved in working with Restoration 225 oftentimes, and I don't have like a bias towards like big churches, little churches. We've been part of a large church and also planted a church, and so everything in between. I love church planters. I am a church planter, and I love church planters in the sense that oftentimes as they're beginning, there's like no ministries to sift through to fight over. So I'm like, if we can be first to market, if we can say, hey, let us teach you how to care for these. Let us connect you to these families. Let us connect you to some of our partners to serve them well. That becomes the heartbeat of that church. And out of that, they can begin to build other ministries. But I think if there was a process that we would take, the first step is to pray. The next step is to identify that person with a big heart. And then the third step would be to determine, decide what direction they're going to go. And so like for us, we said care portal, care communities, care connections. And I think partnering with us, determining really partnering with us and learning the different ways that they can get involved and decide as a church what is best for us in this season. And we have churches that do all three. We've done all three at different times. There's some churches that go one way and they're like, we only want to do care communities. And we're like, praise the Lord. There's some churches, and we say community champions is a fourth way too, because to fund the mission and the things that we're doing, there's business partners, there's individuals, there's churches who help fund the mission of what we do, which is incredible. But then also to come alongside and say, we want to do a care connection. We had businesses for a long time that just did sock drives, and we pick up socks for these foster kids and for families and agencies. We have some that want to always do Easter baskets and Christmas gifts. Christmas gifts are amazing. At Christmas time, this is like the one time everybody everywhere like calls us and they're like, we want to give gifts and we want to hook it up. And I'd say that is so good.
But I always say, kids need things other than December.
Other than December, yes.
December's not the only month.
We should do Christmas in July, Christmas in January, Christmas in February, and not just that, but all the different things. So Care Connections are a great way. And then Care Portal is an easy first step. And so help to decide what your church is going to do. Create some boundaries and some, know your bandwidth and parameters, and then just do it. Do something. Do something rather than nothing. Again, don't be a church who, since you don't know what to do, you do nothing at all. Mm-hmm. Start with a drive. Start with a diaper drive.
And you can't solve it all, right?
No.
Sometimes people shut down or churches shut down because the foster care world, the kinship care world, the vulnerable child world is too much.
Yeah.
There's too many problems. There's too much need. There's too many kids. We cannot make an impact here. And we firmly believe, obviously, you can.
Yeah, we have a couple years ago at our Faith and Foster Care Conference, we said our theme was one at a time. And that came from this idea of the Good Samaritan. And a pastor that I heard once say, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Now, we can't cure everything. We can't solve every crisis. We can't help every family. But one at a time, or do for one what we wish we could do for everyone, is such a good principle to live by. Because if we can help one family, if you can help one kid have a future, oh man, that was worth it. So as a church, if you're like, okay, we helped one family, we're going to focus on one family. And we have some care communities at churches that have been serving one family for like 2 years. And so they said yes, and that's the one they're going to do. And think about the depth of that relationship. Think about the kind of care and attention that family has received over the years from this one church and one family. And now we hope that multiplies at churches and we see more and more and more. But pray, right? Find that one individual with a big heart, determine what direction you're going to go and do something. That would be the 4 steps. And that all goes in collaboration with connecting with us. And we're not the market. So if somebody wants to do something without us, that's great. And there's other agencies out there. But the thing that I try to say to church planners, to pastors is I know I'm a pastor and budgets are tight. You have other ministries and there's other things going on. There's things to capture your attention. There's counseling. Let us be part of your team to help train and equip you to engage your community in a way that serves families impacted by foster care. We heard it said many years ago, and now 5 years I've been part of R225. We are, I don't want to call us, we've always been called experts. I don't know if we're experts, but we have an expertise in this space now because of the lived experience that we have and the amount of failures that we've had as well as successes. We've learned a lot, and so we want to come alongside these churches and help them to be equipped to do the work. And then also we want to be the bridge builder. And so pastors don't have to think about how do I get to this county meeting or how do I meet this new agency or organization. It's like, no, we'll do that, and then we will connect you guys together so that more families can be served.
Yeah, I know so often the question is, what can I do? How can I help? How can I serve? Or it's overwhelming. It's like either shut down or what can I do? And then it doesn't, either way, nothing happens because what can I do? But they don't take it to the next point. And so that's where Restoration 225 was really birthed, was to say, we will show you exactly how you can get involved and make that seamless for you and easy, so to speak, right? You might have to go deliver the item and meet the family, but we can make that contact. You're not having to search out, oh, let me look up social agency. That does take time, and we all are very busy people. We understand that. So that's where I think Restoration 225 sweet spot is, to say we take the people that want to help and the agencies that need the help and the children that are involved and connected to those agencies, and we bring them together so that each side is fulfilling the need that they have and that they want and getting involved. And I love that. I love the way you put it. And like you said, the 3 ways. Care Portal, Care Connections, and Care Communities. I'm gonna at the end, I'll give our website and talk a little bit about that and give people like a direct way to get in contact with us. Kind of just closing it up here, if there was one thing that someone's listening today and they said, okay, I want to serve children in need in San Diego County, how would you encourage them? Who can they talk to in their church? Could they go to their pastor? Could they go, like, what is the first conversation that they should have?
Yeah, I think as a church, sometimes depending on the kind of the structure of your church, sometimes it's hard. I know it sounds weird. I'm a pastor. I'm available, and I want our church members to come to me and talk to me, and I want to be involved in that. But then I want to set them loose because they have gifts and passions. I always tell our church there's a few things that we do. Some things we're going to lead. We're going to lead the way in. We're going to do this ministry. Some things we're going to partner with because maybe we don't have a person or expertise in it. This is where, like, I would tell our church, and we do, it's just unique, to partner with an organization like Restoration 225, or as we partner with Young Lives or other groups that are doing something, or those food distributions that are out there. Maybe we don't have one, but let's partner and serve with or alongside. And some things we pray for. Like if someone comes to me and says, we want to do an underwater basket weaving ministry, I think that, praise the Lord, we're going to pray over you to do underwater basket weaving, but that's not for us. And I know that's funny, but I think starting and knowing kind of the nuances to your church, also looking at the church that already exists and maybe talking to the ministries. So if you're a church of, let's say, 100 or larger and you have a youth ministry, maybe talking to the youth pastor and saying, hey, in what ways can we get our youth involved in this?
Yes.
Our kids ministry. And then coming and meeting with us. We would love to meet you. We would love to have coffee with you. We would love to get your church connected. And honestly, don't tell your pastor I'm saying this, but honestly, I would love to have the conversation with your pastor as another pastor and say, hey, listen, pastor to pastor, I know what you're going through, and here's how we can help. And so we want to take that weight off of you. If you have a great relationship with your pastor, go to him. I'm not saying to bait and switch. I'm just saying that sometimes people don't always know what to do or what to say. And so contact us, and I would love to talk to your pastor myself and say, hey, here's what we're doing, and I can speak the language in such a way that hopefully they may say, oh, I see. Because sometimes pastors might feel like, oh, another thing, even if it's a good thing. The last thing I'd say before we close out is kind of the big dream I have, and we have at Restoration 225, you said, is that 1,400 Christian churches and hitting that 10%. Having 140 churches on our team deeply engaged, like they're all in, would be a game changer. That wouldn't just be impactful in San Diego, it would change everything. It would be the start of a movement. And we used to say this in the beginning, and it's a little scary to say, especially online right now, but work us out of a job. We want the church to step up in such a way that there's actually like no need for R225. Now, we all love what we do and want to be here for a long, long time. So I say that like carefully and cautiously. But at the same time, imagine if all these churches were actually being the church in our city and our community with vulnerable families and seeing the people in their seats, seeing the people in their city and doing something. It would change everything. And not just creating ministries to fill seats, which is good and it's not bad, but creating ministries to meet needs. And that's not always I'm going to use the word sexy. It's not always as sexy because it's messy. We talked about this earlier. It's messy and it's hard. And people with complex situations and hard circumstances, they don't just show up and have a cookie cutter family with everything going on and start to give and start to serve. And then the next week, like some of the families that we're serving and come alongside, they need a lot of love and attention. And they need a lot of support and help. And so it's not as clean, it's not as quick to pull them into your churches and into our churches. And so, but that's what Jesus calls us to do. So that would be my heart for R225 and what we get to do.
We're working on it. We're working on it every day.
One church at a time.
One church at a time, one family at a time, one child at a time. And I love that. That's always our focus. And remembering, I always mention that starfish story. You're throwing the starfish back. You're not going to get all the starfish, but you meant a lot to that one. And I have personally experienced that as a child of adoption. Someone picked me up. And someone took care of me, and I was that starfish. And so I always think about that whenever I get a little discouraged, whenever I get down, like, oh my gosh, there's so much that needs to be done right here in San Diego County, not to mention the United States, right? But And we're not going to do it all. I hope, with God's help, I believe we can do a lot more than we are doing. But I'm also not going to be discouraged because there's so much to do. I'm going to be encouraged because I know, and we've already met some of them on our podcast today, and there's so many more that we'd love to have on in the future that are doing this work and are making a difference. And we just need more. We need more partners. We need more people that will come alongside a family and a child in need. And I think we all can imagine what it might be like to be that child. And we have had some experiences where children have said, oh, the church is coming to help us. I didn't know churches helped. That was a statement when one of the children said that. I knew they had, fun activities, but I didn't know they'd come and help me.
Yeah.
And we want to change that. We want to change that in San Diego County. We want to change that across the country. I know there's a lot of churches doing a lot of great work, but we want more. We want more presence. And so, well, as always, Logan, I love doing the podcast with you. You were kind of my guest today, but not really. You're really my co-podcast host. Any last things you want to say before we close it out for this session?
Well, we'd always say do something. Pray about it and do something. So
let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Logan. It sounds silly to say that to you as you are my co-host, but I appreciate your words of wisdom and all that you share today. And I really hope that it encourages pastors and church members across San Diego County to, hey, I'm not really sure how to get involved, but I'm going to look up R225 and I'm going to give you that website in a minute and jump in. And so we want to also thank Coastal Cast Studios for helping us record and produce this podcast today. And if you want to get involved and find out more information, please visit our website at restoration225.org. Or follow us on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, at Restoration225. And finally, it is our sincere hope that you will join us in being the heart behind the help. Now, go care for one today.